Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So this is the opportunity to listen to some teachings, and the Buddha encourages us to contemplate what we hear, what we read, contemplate the teachings, not just to believe them or accept them, but to consider them, to contemplate, to investigate. And of course, this requires a certain amount of openness of mind, because you never know what you're going to hear. I usually keep it sweet. But sometimes we might hear things we don't necessarily like or agree with, but take them for contemplation. And one of the teachings Ajahn Chah used to give was, he said, you should listen with your heart. And it took me a while to really understand this, what it really means, because, of course, our ears are in our head, close to our brain. I haven't got ears in my heart. And when I first heard about it, my Thai was not very good, so I had to use my brain quite a bit to hear the Thai language, to translate it into English. But fortunately, that year I was there at Ajahn Chah's monastery. He spoke very simple Central Thai language, so I knew kind of basic language. And I made an effort to study it, especially I recorded his talks and went to my hut and got out the dictionary and made an effort to learn his language. So after a while, it began to sort of flow a bit more without having to translate. And then I began to appreciate what he meant by listen with your heart. Most of the time we tend to filter it through our concepts, our ideas. That sounds good. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. But listening with your heart, it means kind of open your mind and just receive what's there. And fortunately, maybe I say Ajahn Chah kept it sweet too. No. Not all the time, actually. So sometimes he did give some, what would you say, some deep reflections. It was more like it wasn't, sweet or sour. It was more like it was, what does he mean? He used to use these puns in the Thai language. Quite easy to use puns in Thai language because it is a tonal language, so you can kind of, mangle the tones and make some funny things out of it. But sometimes it did take a little bit of, what's the meaning of that? It was simple, yet could be very profound too. One of there's a few of them, but one that comes to mind was, he said, one time he said, suffering is suffering, but happiness is suffering too. Do you get it? Yeah? It's a bit easier in Thai. You say, tuk ben tuk, suk ben tuk. Huh? So you kind of, it sounds a bit poetic, doesn't it? Tuk ben tuk, suk ben tuk. Sounds like a children's puzzle, actually. But you see that, maybe you see the kind of paradox or irony or something in that. Of course, suffering is suffering, sure, but happiness is suffering. What do you mean? Huh? You have to kind of shift your mind to almost a different dimension. Happiness is suffering because it's unreliable. You can't depend upon it. It's not that it's, suffering per se, but it's suffering in the sense of being frustrated or disappointed in the long term, you see. So, of course, suffering is suffering. Yeah, we got that. Don't need to explain that. But happiness is suffering? Yeah. Please, I don't want to hear that, do you? Most people don't want to hear that even, But once you can appreciate, the wisdom in that, if you can say the deeper meaning of it, it's actually very profound teaching, isn't it? All the happiness you're chasing after is actually ultimately suffering. Ultimately disappointing. It takes a while, maybe a bit of experience. We have to, be at least 35 to appreciate that. It's an old person's wisdom. No, it's still lots of fun out there. Try again, try again, try again. After 35, you haven't got the energy to keep trying anymore. So now it sinks in, yes. But sometime it was, when you listen with your heart, as it were, most of the time, from my point of view anyway, I was listening to this in my head, and it was, of course, a bit more comparing and analyzing it. That sounds good, yeah, I like that. That sounds wise, yeah, that doesn't sound so wise. But if you listen with your heart, you just have to leave your heart open and see what resonates, or what the effect is, really, what the effect. Some things your heart kind of maybe shrinks from, When he talked quite a bit about, of course, in Buddhism, about suffering, And so when, I can see instinctively how my heart would, I don't want to hear that. Talk about love and light, please. But of course, I would say that the whole point of the Buddhist teaching is to mention suffering so much because it's something we usually ignore. Who wants to hear about it, huh? It's not exactly a popular party topic, is it? Nowadays, as we get older, when I talk to some of the older monks, our first topic is about how are you feeling? How's your health? I just had a long conversation with, well, not a long one, but part of the conversation with Ajahn Kevali was about how my health is, you see. And it can be, still it's still a bit exciting. But normally you don't want to hear about people suffering, do you? Had enough of it. And then, if you really, ask people how they're really feeling, well, if you're really open to it, most people just say, how are you feeling? Yeah, fine. Yeah. Do you really want to hear? Especially going through the immigration or somewhere, mostly American immigration here. How you doing? How you doing? You really want to know? Make it five words or less. But the Buddha reminds us that it really is the elephant in the room, isn't it? Suffering, until you can get some some handle on it. I mean, it's going to be there. You're running away from it all your life, and it's there all the time. You know, even though you don't want to talk about it, but it's still there anyway, isn't it? You know, so the more we can bring it out into the open, make it conscious, you know, and that's what, I mean, for example, in Thai society, in Thailand, most people, even if they aren't, practicing Buddhists, they still know a bit about the basic Buddhist teachings, the Four Noble Truths, and you ask people about, you know about Buddhism? Oh, Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. Anything else? No, just the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. I learned that in kindergarten, probably, yeah? Yes, the 4 and the 8, yeah? Can you count that high, 8, when you're in kindergarten? But you get these basic teachings. I mean, many of them, I was on a bus one time in Bangkok, and the monks sit at the very back of the bus. Well, we used to anyway. I haven't gone on a bus for a long time, but the monks ride free on the buses in Bangkok, you see. But we get on the very back of the bus, you see. And so I got on the back of the bus, and there's another monk sitting there. So he said, "Oh, you're a Western monk." I said, "Oh, you've noticed." And then he said, "Well, why did you come and ordain?" And I said, "Oh, again, do you really want to know?" So I said, "Oh, life is suffering." And he said, "Oh, yes, I know about suffering. Yes, dukkha. Yeah. Jatipi dukkha, jarapi dukkha, maranampi dukkha." Went through the morning chanting or evening chanting? I said, "You don't really know what suffering is, do you?" Just repeat the chanting, Yeah, I think he was one of these kind of, he looked very, very innocent. He's probably, ordained as a novice when he's 12 years old and, went through the system and never really suffered. Maybe he didn't get what he wanted on alms around one day. That was suffering. I don't know if you've seen this movie made by the BBC about Ajahn Chah's monastery in Thailand, The Mindful Way. Anyway, it was a film specially made by the BBC for the BBC, Open University. And the man who made it, he went to Thailand. He lived there for a week in Wat Nanachat, Wat Papong, and then he called in his camera crew one day, and they filmed it all in one day. You see? So he had it all kind of planned out. Now, one of those scenes is this interview with a young novice. I think he was, yeah. I mean, I can't tell how young he was, but he was probably about 15, maybe. And so the Western monk, who was sort of narrating, he asked this novice. He said, "Why did you come to the monastery?" Oh, life is suffering," he says. And then he asked, "Well, what's so suffering about life?" The novice kind of stopped, and he had asked him again, "What's suffering about life?" He said, "Well, tending water buffaloes is suffering," he says. I never tended a water buffalo, so I don't know, but they're pretty docile normally, But I guess you got to keep them out of the rice paddy, and But it's all the suffering he knew was having to look after water buffaloes, you see. So, but most people, when they can contemplate, like just having that guideline of the chanting, birth is suffering, old age is suffering, death is suffering. I mean, you got to contemplate, what does that mean? Birth. What does birth mean? And most of us can't remember what birth was, can we? But just being, you can say, born into new situations. Being into, I mean, when I was a bit younger, I traveled quite a bit, and when I look back at it, I realize how anxious it was actually. On one hand, it's a bit exhilarating, there's lots of adrenaline, but going to new places and When I was 19 or something, I went to Europe, and I think one of the first countries I went to was Germany. It wasn't too bad because at least they drove on the right side of the road, and same as in Canada, you know. But the people didn't speak English so well, you know. So there was the first time I just couldn't talk to anybody. You know, just ask them things simply, you know. You had to kind of use your hands or something, or find somebody who spoke a bit of English. And then, you know, where to find a place to sleep. You know, I finally had to learn, you know, what the word for youth hostel was in German, the Jugendherberger. Maybe. Right? Is that? Huh? Close enough, yeah. I think you probably understand me. But just, you know, just not having that security of knowing where you're going to stay tonight, how to get any food, you know, it was quite actually a stressful situation. On one hand, it was, you know, it was a good thing I was young, I guess, you know, and I didn't care about making a fool of myself. But having to travel every day, you know, going to a new place, meeting new people, finding new situations. Fortunately, I had quite a good sense of direction, so I didn't get lost too often. Yeah. Remember once I was was traveling in Iran, I think it was. This other man, I was traveling with a man who had a car, you see. So we were trying to get out of Tehran, and so we go somewhere. There's hardly any road signs, I guess, or they were all in Parsi or something, or Arabic. Anyway, we couldn't find our way to the next town, you know. So he said, okay, he pulled over next to somebody and asked them, you know, which direction to this place. And the first person points that way. And so we have a bit further, ask the next person, they said, oh, point that way. We're just going around in circles, you know. Finally, we got out of the town anyway, out of Tehran eventually. It took us hours and hours going this way and that way and that way and that way. And then later we found out that this part of the culture of Iran, that you don't want to say no to anybody. You can't say you don't know. You're trying to be helpful, say, oh, that way. You don't know, but you're trying to be helpful, right? Well, you're not helpful. But they just can't say they don't know. It's just not in their language, I guess, or something. You know, how to get, where's the next town? Wait to the next town, I don't know. They just don't say it. Yeah. So anyway, it was a very good lesson anyway in confusion. But going to different cultural situations, you know, it's all a big mystery. You know, and you know, so it's the unknown. And part of it was a bit of an adventure, just not knowing. You know, you just have to wing it. It's actually a bit like spiritual life. You know, the Buddha gives us, you know, if you read the book, it sounds very clear, you know, Eightfold Path. But what is the Eightfold Path? Not only, you know, you have to know what it is technically, and then what's the experience? And when I went to Thailand at the beginning, I studied a bit about Buddhism, so I knew the Eightfold Path, you know. But then when I was meditating, is this right view? Is this right thought? You know, is this right mindfulness? You know? And it was a real struggle to find out what the experience was. I had the concept in my mind already, and I was trying to, you know, using that concept, at least as a signpost, but of course it didn't. The experience, you know, like going somewhere, there's a road sign, you know, to go into Wiseman's Ferry, and then you get there, this wasn't what I imagined, you know, where's the wise man? You know? You have your idea in your mind, what it is, and then you try and fulfill that concept. So the same in spiritual practice. We have our ideas. So maybe, especially people have all kinds of ideas about meditation. The instructions are very simple, right? Just sit down. I just thought I'd go to Thailand for 1 month, sit in a quiet place and enter into very deep samadhi, get enlightened, and then pack up and go home. Well, wasn't quite what my experience. First of all, it was very hard to find a quiet place in Thailand. Of course, the places that most people go, of course, are the city, right? Well, I did escape from Bangkok and went up to the North Thailand, to Chiang Mai, and it was a very nice old city, but it was even noisier than Bangkok. They have these, especially there's quite a few temples there in the old city, and they have the walls around them. See, and so you walk down the streets, and there are these motorcycles going down, and this sound reverberating across the walls of the building, of the temples. You see. So the first place, I did find a place anyway. It was easy to find a monastery to go stay in, but it was so noisy, couldn't meditate there. But fortunately, I was able to find a quieter place out in the country. But again, it wasn't what I imagined. It wasn't actually a meditation center. It was just a quiet forest monastery. So had to, that was what I had. That's what I experienced. So okay, try and put up with it. But after the first, it took me 3 weeks to find that forest monastery. 3 weeks. So I already had to change my plans. I couldn't stay a month. I knew I couldn't get enlightened in 1 week. I was so humble. I need at least a month. So I had to renew my visa for another month. And then it wasn't quite the same. It wasn't quite the same as I imagined. I can go from this busy mind at university. I can just go to Thailand and the Buddhist country and absorb in a quiet monastery and just sit there and just breathe in and breathe out. I forgot that I take my mind with me. It was in this quiet monastery, but the mind was not very quiet. Still traveling, still regurgitating travel experiences and then planning the next trip. So it wasn't quite, so the experience was not quite the same as the idea was. So after a while I realized, it's going to take me longer than a month maybe. How can I manage this? Might need to stay 2 months. Just like the practice, many of us have a sort of a conceptual idea of the practice. I practice for so many days, so many hours a day. The mind should calm down so much. One time when I was with Ajahn Chah, he was talking, it must be near the end of the rains retreat, and he's talking about what I call in English the 5-year disease, 5-year illness. That's in the monastic tradition, and we stay with a teacher for 5 years. After 5 years, it's sort of like it's like a graduation in a way. You're graduating from being dependent upon the teacher, having to stay with the teacher, and then you can go on your own, you see. So it's sort of a significant anniversary after 5 years. So he said that, sometimes the monks, after 5 years as a monk, they say, okay, what have I gained in 5 years? Am I gonna stay with it? Am I gonna disrobe? Am I gonna, stay in the monastery, go somewhere else or whatever? What do I do? So, but what have I gained in 5 years? And he said, it's the wrong question. You shouldn't be asking what you've gained. You should ask what you've given up in 5 years. You ask yourself what you gained. Have I gained any concentration? Well, have I gained any wisdom? Well, have I gained any patience? Well, no. You see, you don't give a very positive answer. You see, I haven't gained an awful lot in 5 years. But if you reflect what you've given up, well, some greed, some aversion, some delusion, even it's a little bit. But you can imagine if that little bit is given up over the rest of your life, it's a lot, isn't it? It accumulates. Even a little bit of change, reducing your greed level, reducing your anger level, your delusion level. What have I gained? I learned a little bit about Buddhism. But then, that in itself it can be a nourishment for your life. You see things differently then. What I've actually gained in a positive sense? Well, hard to say, isn't it? Many times it doesn't come out very positive. I'm not, 5 years, I'm not enlightened yet. If I'd gone to university, I would have got a degree, At least a bachelor's degree, but 5 years in the monkhood, I just got sore knees. Maybe I can tolerate a few more mosquito bites, but no. But once we reflect upon what we've given up, then our life is much more lighter, isn't it? In fact, even you consider it, what I've gained is an ego question, isn't it? What have I gained? You say, what have I given up? Well, to give up, let go, is not something the ego would cherish, would it? I've given up, my comforts. I've given up my freedom. I've given up, But when you consider it, how your mind feels, how your heart feels, it is much more light, much lighter. Giving up things, lighter, isn't it? Yeah. Trying to get things is packing, it's a burden, isn't it? Yeah. Even getting, so-called getting concentration, getting better meditation. Now I've got to keep it up. I got to prove it to somebody. No. But if I've given up some confusion, some delusion, some uncertainty, some fear, then your heart opens up, lightens up, and opens up. Quite a different perspective then. And the same with our practice. We think maybe we usually think in kind of time-bound scales. So many years, so many hours of practice. Yeah. But the Buddha gave a simile, about the wearing away of literally the outflows of selfhood. He said you have a desire for it, you have a wish for it. Oh, may my defilements pass away, may I be liberated. He said. But he said, it's not going to happen just by hoping. So you have to develop the what I call the skillful qualities. Develop what are technically called the 37 factors supports for awakening, the Bodhipakkhya Dhammas. And these are the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the spiritual powers, the 7 factors of awakening, the Eightfold Path. You develop those qualities, and the outflows of selfhood will be worn away naturally. And just like he said, he gave the analogy of a ship, that's been dry docked and just left on the beach. And just by itself, it'll wear away. And if you don't look after it, you don't maintain it, the weather will deteriorate it, won't it? It will cause deterioration in it. So, rather than hope, oh, may my, spend our time thinking about, oh, may my defilements pass away, not by hoping. Maybe even get more greed. You develop some spiritual greed. But you develop, spend that time, rather than hoping that your defilements pass away, spend your time focusing attention on the breathing, on the exercises in developing mindfulness, bringing awareness to the sensations in the body. What's the sensation now in the body? What's the state of mind right now? What's the feeling tone? Then, though you develop those qualities of mindfulness, and then, then the defilements fade away or worn away. You don't, for example, just being aware of developing the foundations of mindfulness, you don't develop that spiritual greed, do you? Oh, my defilements pass away. What's the feeling in the body? What's the sensation in the body? Simple as that. Sensation in the body is greed. State of mind is greed. No. Just being conscious of it. Just bringing it up into consciousness. Just being able to connect with greed, as an experience. Maybe that is more useful, more beneficial than feeding the greed. May my defilements pass away. They're bringing awareness to the experiences we are having. They come into consciousness. Once they're in the consciousness, once we're fully conscious of them, we let them go. Now I know what greed is. Before it was just a concept in my mind, but now I get some understanding of it. Yes, there is this longing. There is this tugging away at the heart. There is this tension in the body. I need this. I want that. Let me gain some direct experience of what that is. So once we get some experience of it, we don't fall for it again. We can wake up before greed takes us over. But many people, they don't even, you think, they don't. If you ask them, well, I don't have any, you just don't see it. The reason you don't have it, you think you don't have it, is you don't see it. That's all. But greed is what the Buddha called one of the underlying dispositions. We're all prone to greed. Just basically at a very, very instinctual level, we all need food, we need shelter, we need warmth. Those are just very primal sources of, you can say, types of greed, aren't they? Very, very primal. We naturally have them. A young child, before it can even think, has these instincts. But then, if you aren't aware of them, you aren't conscious of them, then they become complicated. Not just food, but special food. Not just comfort, but air-conditioned luxury hut. I didn't put it on today. I am conscious of energy saving sometimes. Although it actually is free energy, from the sun. So I'm not burning coal. Not hooked into a coal-fired power plant. Just using up nature's offering, that's all. But if we don't, and there is something inside us, of course, that, some aspect of the self, which we can say in a way, beginning instinctively needs it, needs food and needs shelter, etc. But then it also wants it. There's can be a certain amount of ego in that. I have air conditioning, and you guys don't. So, and I deserve it. I'm an Ajahn. So, I'm special. But I can recognize, you can recognize the ego in that, can't you? Whereas if you recognize, okay, it's just a, as I get old, I can make excuses, right? As I get older, I really need it. If it's too hot, I might have a heart attack. Yeah, if it was so hot yesterday, I could have had a heart attack and then couldn't give the talk tonight, could I? So you're lucky I survived, maybe. But where is the difference between the, you can say the need or the greed, the very fundamental need or the greed. How much can you get by with? I mean, I was fortunate to going to Thailand and living in the forest monastery. It was very simple. We had no choice. Living in northeast Thailand, you're lucky to have a roof over your head. You weren't worried about what kind of tin roof it was, whether it was rusty or not. You're just happy to be out of the rain. Have a shelter, have a straw mat to lie on or something. So it was quite surprising how the body can adapt, can adjust, and how little you can get by with actually. I could never imagine if you hear about it, sleeping on a wooden floor with a thin rush mat. Are you kidding? Yeah. Got any choice? I did try a few little tricks, mind you, like sleep on the blanket. But the blankets were thin too, so it wasn't much difference. Yeah, when I was the first winter I was in Thailand, I was a novice, and we just had we had one robe, one thin cotton robe, and it was really freezing. Here I come from Canada, but I never felt colder in my life than I have in Thailand. Yeah. It wasn't because of the weather; it was because of the lack of clothes. We have to go out in the morning to collect the food, barefoot, no hat, and I had this thin cotton robe in the wintertime. And it was so cold, sometimes I was shivering so much I could hardly hold the bowl steady. A lot of people put any rice in it, hold steady, so they don't drop it. So I was creative, so I decided I'd wrap the blanket inside my robe, you see. So I wrapped it up. The trouble was the blanket was yellow, and the robe was sort of brown, you see. So I had to be careful it didn't show. And then, of course, when I would put it on, I was sort of putting a blanket under your robe, You really are hunched up like a Michelin man, So I thought, oh, here comes the fat monk again. But it was so awkward, I finally had to just endure the cold. But it was really, quite a very useful experience to live so simply. You realize how you could just live with the very bare essentials. You didn't need all the modern conveniences, didn't need air conditioning. I was younger then. Didn't need electricity. And then it could become quite easy to recognize, what was the basic needs. We have our reflection upon the 4 basic requisites. Food, shelter, clothing, medicine. 4 basics. And then nowadays, would we ever get a chance to just look at the basics of alms food, whatever is offered to you? Just a basic. You say, just one piece of cloth to wrap your body in. A very basic shelter. And the reflection actually is, that the shelter is the root of a tree. Yeah. It's living under a tree as shelter. I won't mention what the medicine is. Alms food. It was actually rag robes. It was a robe material that was rags, was thrown away by people, and monks collected the rags and sewed them all together for a robe. And nowadays we have, factory-made silk robes, right? Pre-dyed and proper color, properly stitched, and all that. And then nowadays it's really a hard contemplation. What is the basic needs, and when does the greed kick in? And then the greed just can leave you kind of, how much more can you take? How much more do you want? Sort of endless, isn't it? Greed is endless. Now, when we go to the storeroom or something, endless choice of, what kind of raw material will I like? Will it take today? Rather than go out and pick up the rags on the street. But these reflections, to contemplate, what is the basic needs, and then where does greed kick in? Sometimes you can begin, when you have that as a point of reference, you can see, oh yes, yeah, my ego is being stretched. Just having the basic necessities can be quite humbling. Yeah. But that's what all I need to get by with. That's all I need, basics. And then you realize how complicated all the extras are. I don't like going to a restaurant usually, because especially nowadays, they say, first of all, you pick something and they say, would you like white bread or brown bread? Would you like butter or margarine? Would you like mayonnaise or ketchup? Just give me a piece of bread, will you? Give me a sandwich. Especially going to a coffee shop these days, huh? It'd take you half an hour to order. And then of course what the size is, Size, strength, quality, flavor. Just give me a glass of water, please. But this is what, when you really find from the experience, if you want to look at the experience, that's when you need to contemplate, what is this really? What is this real? What is the real sensation in the body? You see the word sensation or feeling. What's the feeling? Yeah. But what is it really? As a direct experience. And you see something different, don't you? Where is the feeling? Huh? You don't just have one feeling, do we? We say, what's the feeling? But, is there one feeling you have all the time? And behind those practices, like the foundations of mindfulness, being aware of the sensation in the body, being aware of the feelings, being aware of the states of mind, those are the practical experiences. When you bring attention to it, you begin to have a deeper understanding. Because behind it is, where is the sensation? Where is the feeling? There isn't one, is there? It's constantly changing. There are feelings constantly going on, constantly being processed. They're processes. So behind it, we recognize just how changeable, impermanent these experiences are. Yeah. We all have sensation, we all have feeling, we all have states of mind, but they're all different. Each person's different. Every time you look at them, they're different. Yeah. Where is it? Where is it exactly? Yeah. Just changing processes. When you can really understand that at a deeper level, then you can just flow with it. Yeah. And one of my early insights, it was about impermanence. And I remember it was a windy day in Vancouver, and the clouds were shooting across the sky, and I looked up there, and there were all these strange patterns of these clouds, looking at them, and then suddenly just occurred to me, there are no clouds. They weren't constant for a second. They kept changing all the time. It was just, all there is condensation, there's humidity, temperature, wind. Where's the cloud? Yeah. Fortunately, they are pretty ephemeral. Otherwise your plane would crash. So many times coming down out of the, on a plane, heading for the cloud, and you think ready to crash, and it's right through it. But even though we know intellectually everything's changing, right? Yeah, but till you experience it, it's quite different. Experience change. There is no thing, and no thingness to anything, including this body. Where is this body? Where is this mind? Fortunately, we can still use the language, right? The mind, the body. So at least you have some, you don't get totally freaked out. Where's this body, Have some vague sense of it, that I can put one foot in front of the other and get back to my hut. But you look at sensations, where is that body? Which sensation is really it? Which is the ultimate sensation of body? But that's not something you can think about, is it, really? And we think in concepts, we think in these various ideas, black and white and up and down, and but experience is quite different. It has you can say almost no dimension to it. Dimensionless, timeless, quite a different way of seeing things. Yeah. And the Buddha gave us these reflections, contemplate the nature of the body-mind. Yeah, when you begin to contemplate them, then you begin to see a deeper truth behind them. Impermanence, imperfection, and there's no substantial entity there. And we probably heard this many times before, but what does it mean as a direct experience? Quite different than having just an idea about it. Yeah. Everything is impermanent, yes. Everything is permanently impermanent. I understand it permanently. When you really see through it, there's a different experience. It's not just something you have to be reminded of, it's something you live then. Body is constantly changing, so don't need to worry about it. Yeah. Today like this, next minute something else. Yeah. Don't have to worry about it. Can learn to flow with it a bit more. Then it becomes something which begins to infuse our life then. Yeah, the flow of life, rather than trying to transform it into something that will please us or that agrees with me or something. So from the contemplation of the basic, you can say the basic theory, the basic concepts. From the contemplation, it should arrive at a direct experience. Aha! That's how it is. Then you know for yourself. Then we're able to, not only fulfill the Buddha's teachings, but then we're, say, almost independent of them. We don't need to believe them. We've seen it for ourselves. So then it's your own wisdom. Till then, we keep reminding ourselves what the practice is, and keep applying it, and then eventually, hopefully, the insights will dawn. And you'll see for yourself. Know for yourself. So let me leave this for your reflection this evening.